Will it make a difference in substance or perception as President Obama nears the halfway mark of this term? Will it bolster the enthusiasm of progressives going to the midterm elections, which are now just 32 days away? In our fourth story, these are the only questions about which anybody outside the White House should really care when a president's chief of staff is leaving. But all the more so in this case, since this high-level personnel change is not happening in a vacuum. If the Obama administration has learned any lessons from the past 2 years, have those particular lessons come too late for what the president may face the next 2 years? Today it became official. White House Chief of Staff Rahm Emanuel is now former and now running for mayor of Chicago. The new interim White House Chief of Staff is White House Senior Advisor Pete Rouse. Mr. Rouse became the Chief of Staff for then Senator Obama 6 years ago. Before that, he had served as the Chief of Staff for Senator Tom Daschle, who was both minority and majority leader. Rouse became known as the 101st Senator, in part for the wide perception that he works well across party lines. As White House Senior Advisor, Rouse helped create the new Consumer Protection Bureau, and he's been given credit for overcoming internal White House friction so that Elizabeth Warren would become the Senior Advisor of that bureau. That may cheer progressives. President Obama once described Rouse as completely ego-free. That may cheer them, too. As for some of the other obvious differences between the outgoing and the incoming.
Obviously, these two gentlemen have slightly different styles. This was a couple of years ago. I pointed out that Rahm, when he was a kid, had lost part of his finger in an accident, and it was his middle finger, so it rendered him mute for a while. Pete has never seen a microphone or a TV camera that he likes.
Also from the president, quote, "There is a saying around the White House, let's let Pete fix it." Let's see if we can get Richard Wolff to fix this, the MSNBC political analyst, Daily Beast contributor, and author of Renegade, The Making of a President. Richard, good evening.
Good evening, Keith.
Did this have anything to do with how quickly Rahm Emanuel became anathema to progressives?
No, otherwise it'd have left a lot earlier. If this was about Rahm's ability to insult progressives or the Special Olympics or in fact polite conversation, his tenure would have been much shorter. This is in the first instance about personal ambition. Rahm was always more comfortable, I think, seeing himself as a principal, not a staffer. And remember, this is a president who has always really not chosen to pander or lean towards progressives. If he was going to do so, he'd have done it in the primaries. He didn't do it then. He's not done it in government. And Pete Rouse, while he has taken a progressive line on some policies, he's known as this guy who reaches out for bipartisan compromise. Actually, Rahm was the guy who liked to run at the Republicans. So, you know, this cuts both ways.
Did this have anything to do with the president's criticism of Fox News or the kind words that Bill Burton had for me and Rachel on Monday? Is there a tonal change, or is all of it temporal coincidence?
Well, I don't doubt that was sincere what Bill Burton said, but
no, nor do I. I'm just wondering if there's anything more to it than it all happened in the same week.
Yeah, no, the tonal thing I think is important when you understand how the White House is approaching these midterm elections. They need to get the base out, they need to fire up progressives, but the coincidence of timing, I think, is just that. It's not that they have shifted the politics. Remember that Pete Rouse is a guy who is used to the Senate. You have to cut across the other line to do that. Ironically, Rahm was the guy who in the House was known as being very aggressive. So I just don't think that the politics are going to change as much as this week or the needs of the next month suggest.
So is there any indication whatsoever that that the president or anybody in the White House recalculated the formula about what to do relative to the base, relative to the middle of the road, and to that, you know, constant negotiation with a group that the president was on record admitting he realized he couldn't negotiate with as of January 27th, 2009?
There have been a lot of recalibrations here, and the question here, this is a sort of hypothetical, looking at where this election may be headed, maybe you want Rahm's skills, his ability to draw out the differences about slugging it out, the kind of dynamics you have in the House, more than you want a Pete Rouse right now. The problems they had in the Senate were really the things that blocked them from getting where they wanted to go on health care. Maybe a Pete Rouse would have been better earlier, a Rahm would have been better now, but this is where they're at because people are burnt out, because they thought that Rahm would be aggressive and go-getting in the first instance. I think you have to separate out, again, what they're trying to do right now, get the base out to vote, because that's going to decide the midterms with where this president, Pete Rouse, and Rahm Emanuel are in the longer term, and that's in the center ground.
All right, and pursuant to that, if there's a slight shift in advance of trying to get the base out for the midterms in 32 days, is it cosmetic and only good for the 32 days, or does the president see things differently going into the prospect of having some sort of mixed bag with either or both House not being in his hands?
They have clearly realized that the idea of getting significant numbers of Republicans isn't going to happen. They realize that Fox News is their enemy, and this is a widespread effort to smear the president on a number of different fronts. So is there a shift there? Yes. I think they have dropped this idea that they're going to change the face of Washington, unite red and blue America. But in the first instance, they've got to get a better result going into this midterms, because otherwise it's going to get really ugly.
MSNBC political analyst Richard Wolff, many thanks. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, Keith.